Chapter 6. Talons and Tea Leaves. When Harry, Ron and Hermione entered the Great Hall for breakfast the next day, the first thing they saw was Draco Malfoy, who seemed to be entertaining a large group of Slytherin with a very funny story. As they passed, Malfoy did a ridiculous impression of swing feet and there was a roar of laughter. "Ignore him," said Hermione, who was right behind Harry. "Just ignore him. It's not worth it." "Hey, Potter," shrieked Patsy Parkinson, a Slytherin girl with a face like a pug. "Potter, the Dementor are coming, Potter." Woo! Harry dropped into a seat at the Gryffindor's table next to Granger Weasley. "New third-year course schedule," said George, passing them over. "What's up with you, Harry?" "Malfoy," said Ron, sitting down on George's other side and glaring over the Slytherin's table. George looked up in time to see Malfoy pretending to faint with terror again. "That little git," he said calmly. "He was so cocky last night when the Dementor were down at our end of the train. Came running into our compartment, didn't he, Fred?" "Nearly wet himself," said Fred with a contemptuous glance at Malfoy. "I wasn't too happy myself," said George. "They are horrible things, those Dementors. Sort of freezing you inside, don't they?" said Fred. "You didn't pass out through, did you?" said Harry in a low voice. "Forget it, Harry," said George bluntly. "Had that had to go to the Azkaban one time, remember, Fred?" And he said it was the worst place he had ever been. He came back all weak and shaking. They sucked the happiness out of the place, Dementor. "Most of the prisoners go mad in there anyway. We'll see how happy Malfoy looks after our first Quidditch match," said Fred. "Gryffindors versus Slytherin, first game of the season, remember." The only time Harry and Malfoy had faced each other in a Quidditch match, Malfoy had definitely come off worse. Feeling slightly more cheerful, Harry helped himself to sausage and fried tomatoes. Hermione was examining her new schedule. "Oh good, we are starting some new subjects today," she said happily. Hermione said, Ron frowning as he looked over her schedule. "They have messed up your schedule. Look, they have got you down for about 10 subjects a day. There isn't enough time." "I'll manage. I have fixed it all with Professor McGonagall." "Look," said Ron, laughing. "See this morning, 9 o'clock deviation and underneath 9 o'clock Muggle study." And Ron leaned closer to the schedule, disbelieving. "Look, underneath that, Artimancy, 9 o'clock. I mean, I know you're good, Hermione, but no one's that good. How are you supposed to be in 3 classes at once?" "Don't be silly," said Hermione shortly. "Of course I won't in 3 classes at once." "Well then, pass the marmalade," said Hermione. "But, oh Ron, what's it to you if my schedule is a bit full?" Hermione snapped. "I told you, I have fixed it all with Miss Professor McGonagall." Just then Hagrid entered the great hall. He was wearing a long moss-clean overcoat and was absent-mindedly swinging a dead polecat from one enormous hand. "All right," he said eagerly, pausing on the way to the staff table. "You in my first ever lesson, right after lunch. Been up since 5 getting everything ready." "Oh, it's okay, me a teachers, honestly." He grinned broadly at them and headed off to the staff table, still swinging the polecat. "Wonder what he's been getting ready," said Ron, a note of anxiety in his voice. The hall was starting to empty as people headed off towards their first lesson. Ron checked his course schedule. "We had better go. Look, deviations at the top of North Tower. I'll take us 10 minutes to get there." They finished their breakfast hastily, said goodbye to Fred and George, and walked back through the hall. As they passed the Slytherin's table, Malfoy did yet another impression of fainting fit. The shouts of laughter followed Harry into the entrance hall. The journey through the castle to North Tower was a long one. 2 years at Hogwarts didn't taught them everything about the castle, and they had never been inside North Tower before. There's got to be a shortcut, Ron panted as they climbed their seventh long staircase. They emerged on an unfamiliar landing where there was nothing but a large painting of a bare stretch of grass hanging on the stone wall. I think it's this way, said Hermione, peering down in the empty passage to the right. Can't be, said Ron, that's out. Look, you can see a bit of the take out of the window. Harry was watching the painting. A fat dapple grey pony had just ambled into the grass and was grazing non-stickily. Harry was used to the subject of Hogwarts painting, moving around and leaving their frame to visit one another, but he always enjoyed watching it. A moment later, a short, squat knight in a suit of armor climbed into the picture after his pony. By the look of the grass stain on his mental knees, he had just fallen off. Ah, he yelled, seeing Harry, Ron, and Hermione. What villain are these that's trespassed upon my private lands? Come to scorn at my fall. Perchance draw your knives, you dogs. There was in astonishment as the little knight took his sword out of its scabbard and began brandishing it violently, hopping up and down in the range. But the sword was too long for him. A particularly wild swing made him overbalance, and he landed face down in the grass. Are you alright? Said Harry, moving closer to the picture. Get back, you screwy bracket, back you rough. The knight seized his sword again and used it to push himself back up. But the blood snake deployed into the grass, and though he pulled with all his might, he couldn't get it out again. Finally, he had to flop back down into the grass and push up his wizard to mop his sweating face. Listen, said Harry, taking advantage of the knight's exhaustion. We are looking for the North Tower. You don't know the way to do it. A quest. The knight's reins seemed to vanish instantly. He clanged to his feet and shouted, Come follow me, dear friends, and we shall find our goals, or yours shall perish bravely in the carriage. He gave the snort another fruitless tide and failed to mount. The fat pony gave up and cried, On foot, then good stare, and gentle lady on, and he ran clanking loudly into the left side of the frame and out to sight. They hurried after him along the corridor, following the sound of his armor. Every now and then they spotted him running through a picture ahead. Be of Southward, the worst is yet to come, yelled the knight, and they saw him repaired in front of the alarmed group of women in Cornelius whose picture hung on the wall of narrow spiral staircase. Laughing loudly, Harry, Ron, and Hermione climbed the tightly spiraling steps, getting dizzier and dizzier until at last they heard the murmur of voices above them and knew they had reached the classroom. Farewell, cried the knight, popping his head into the painting of some sister-looking monk. Farewell, my comrades in arms. If ever you have need to noble heart and still you call upon Sir Tangon, yea, will call you, muttered Ron as the knight disappeared. If we ever need someone mental, they climbed the last few steps and emerged into a tiny landing where most of the class was already assembled. There were no doors of his landing, but Ron nudged Harry and pointed at the ceiling where there was a circular trapdoor with a brass plaque on it. Salbial Tranway, Deviation Teacher. Harry read, How are we supposed to get up there? As though in answer to his question, the trapdoor suddenly opened and a silvery ladder descended right at Harry's feet. Everyone got quiet. After you, said Ron, grinding so Harry climbed the ladder first. He emerged into the strangest looking classroom he had ever seen. In fact, it didn't look like a classroom at all, more like a cross between someone's attic and an old fashioned tea shop. At last, 20 small circular tables were crammed inside it, all surrounded by seats, armchair, and fat little puffs. Everything was lit with a dim Tyson light. The curtain at the window were all closed and the many lamps were dropped with dark red skewers. It was slightly warm, and the fire that was burning under the crowded mantelpiece was giving off a heavy sickle sort of perfume as it hid a large copper kettle. The slaves running around the circular walls were crammed with dusky looking feathers, stump of candles, many pack of tattered playing cards, countless silvery crystal balls, and a huge array of teacups. Ron appeared at Harry's shoulder as the class assembled around them, all talking in whispered. "Where is she?" Ron said. A voice came suddenly out of the shadow, a soft, misty sort of voice. "Welcome," it said. "How nice to see you in the physical world at last." Harry's immediate impression was of a large, glittering insect. Professor Trelawney moved into the firelight and they saw that she was very thin. Her large glasses magnified her eyes to several times their natural size, and she was dragged in a gauzy sparkler shawl. Innumerable chains and beads hung around her spindly neck, and her arms and hands were exhausted with bangles and rings. "Sit, my children, sit," she said, and they all climbed awkwardly into armchairs. Or sank down to puffs. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat themselves around the same round table. "Welcome to Deviation," said Professor Trelawney, who had seated herself in the winged armchair in front of the fire. "My name is Professor Trelawney. You may not have seen me before. I find that descending too often into the hustle and bustle of the main school cloud my inner eye." Nobody said anything to this extraordinary pronouncement. Professor Trelawney delicately rearranged her shawl and continued. "So you have chosen to study deviation, the most difficult of all magical arts. I must warn you at the outset that if you do not have the sight, there is very little I will be able to teach you. Books can take you only so far in this field." At this word, both Harry and Ron glanced glaring at Hermione, who looked startled at the news that books wouldn't be much help in this subject. Many witches and wizards, talented through they are in the area of loud bangs and smells and suddenly disappearing, are yet unable to penetrate the wild mysteries of the future. Professor Trelawney went on, her enormous glaringly eyes moving from face to nervous faces. "It is a gift granted to few. You boy," she said suddenly to Neville, who almost toppled off his post. "Is your grandmother well?" "I think so," said Neville tremulously. "I wouldn't be so sure if I were you, dear," said Professor Trelawney, the firelight glinting on her long emerald earring. Neville gulped. Professor Trelawney continued placidly. "We will be covering the basic methods of deviation this year. The first term will be devoted to reading the tea leaves. Next term we shall progress to palmistry. By the way, my dear," she shot suddenly at Parvati Patil, "be aware a red-haired man." Parvati gave a startled look at Ron, who was right behind her, and edged her chair away from him. "In the second term," Professor Trelawney went on, "we shall progress to the crystal ball if we have finished with fire omens. That is, unfortunately, classes will be disturbed in February by a nasty bout of flu. I myself will lose my voice, and round Easter, one of our members will leave us. forever. A very tense silence followed his pronouncement, but Professor Trelawney seemed unaware of it. I wonder, dear, she said, Lavender Brown, who was nearest and shrank back in her chair. If you could pass me the largest silver teapot, Lavender, looking relieved, stood up, looked at enormous teapot from the shelf, and put it down on the table in front of Professor Travanway. Thank you, my dear. Incidentally, that thing you are decreasing, it will happen on Friday, the 16th of October. Lavender trembled. Now I want you all to divide into pairs. Collect a teacup from the shelf. Come to me and I will fill it. Then sit down and drink. Drink until only a drag remains. Swirl this around the cup 3 times with the left hand. Then turn the cup upstairs down in its saucer. Wait for the last of the tea to drain away. Then give your cup to your partner to read. You will interpret the partners using pages 5 and 6 of Unfogging the Future. I shall move among you, helping and instructing. Oh, and dear. She caught Neville by the arm as he made to stand up. After you have broken your first cup, will you be so kind as to select one of the blue patterned ones? I'm rather attached to the pink. Sure enough, Neville had no sooner reached the shelf of teacup when there was a trickle of breaking china. Officer Trevor swept over to him, holding a dustpan and brush, and said, one of the blue ones, then dear of you wouldn't mind, thank you. When Harry and Ron had to their teacup filled, they went back to their table and tried to drink the scalding tea quietly. They swirled the drag around Professor Trelawney they had instructed, then drained the cup and swapped over. Right, said Ron as they both opened their books at pages 5 and 6. What can you see in mine? A lot of soggy brown stuff, said Harry. The heavily perfumed smoke in the room was making him feel sleepy and stupid. Clouded your mind, my dear, and allow your eyes to see past the mundane, Professor Travanway cried through the gloom. Harry tried to pull himself together. Right, you have got a crooked sort of cross, he consulted, unfogging the future. That means you are going to have trial and suffering. Sorry about that, but there is thing that could be the sun hang on. That means great happiness. So you are going to suffer but are very happy. You need your inner eye tested if you ask me, said Ron, and they both had to stifle their laugh as Professor Trelawney gazed in their direction. My turn. Ron peered into Harry's teacup. His forehead wrinkled with efforts. There is Blob, a bit like a bowler hat. He said, maybe you are going to work for the Ministry of Magic. He turned the teacup the other way up, but this way it took more like an acron. What's that? He scanned his copy of Unfogging the Future. A whitefall, unexpected gold, excellent, you can lend me some. And there is a thing there. He turned the cup again that looked like an animal. Hey, if that was its head, it looked like a hippo, no, a sheep. Professor Travanway veered around as Harry let out a snort of laughter. Let me see that, my dear, said reprovingly to Ron, sweeping over and snatching Harry's cup from him. Everyone went quiet to watch. Professor Trelawney was staring into the teacup, rotating the counterclockwise. The falcon, my dear, you have a deadly enemy. But everyone knows that, said Hermione in a loud whisper. Professor Trelawney started at her. Well, they do, said Hermione. Everybody knows about Harry and you know who. Harry and Ron stared at her with a mixture of amazement and admiration. They had never heard Hermione speak to teacher like that before. Professor Trelawney chose not to reply. She lowered her huge eyes to Harry's cup again and continued to turn it. club and attack, dear. Dear, this is not a happy cup. I thought what was a bowler hat, said Ron sheepishly. The skull, danger in your path, my dear. Everyone was staring transfixion of Professor Tranway, who gave the cup a final turn, cast and then screamed. There was another tickle of breaking china Neville and smashed his second cup. Professor Tralway sank into a vacant armchair, get glittering hand at her heart and her eyes closed. My dear boy, my poor dear boy. No, it's kinder not to say. No, don't ask me. What is it? Professor said. Dean Thomas at once. Everyone had got to their feet and slowly they crowded around Harry and Ron's table, pressing close to Professor Trelawney's chair to get a good look at Harry's cup. My dear Professor Trelawney's huge eyes opened dramatically. You have the green. The what? Said Harry. He could tell that he wasn't the only one who didn't understand. Dean Thomas struggled at him and Lavender Brown looked puzzled, but nearly everyone else clapped their hand to their mouth in horror. The Grim, my dear, the Grim, cried Professor Trelawney, who looked shocked that Harry hadn't understood. The giant scarlet dog that haunted churchyard, my dear boy, it is an omen, the worst omen of death. Harry's stomach lurched. A dog on the cover of Death Omens in the Flourish and Blots, the dog in the shadow of Magnolia Crescent. Lavender Brown clapped her hand to her mouth too. Everyone was looking at Harry, everyone except Hermione, who had gotten up and moved around the back of Professor Talon's chair. I don't think it looked like a dream, she said flatly. Professor Trelawney surveyed Hermione with mountaining dislike. You'll forgive me for saying so, my dear, but I perceived very little aura around you, very little respective to the resonance of the future. Seamus Finnegan was titled his head from side to side. It looked like a game. If you do this, he said with his eyes almost shut, but it looked more like a donkey from here. He said, leaning to the left. When you have fall finished deciding whether I'm going to die or not, said Harry, taking even himself by surprise. Now nobody seemed to want to look at him. I think we will leave the lesson here for today, said Professor Talway in a her mysterious voice. Yes, please pack away your things. Silently, the class took their teacups back to Professor Trelawney, packed away their books, and closed their bags. Even Ron was avoiding Harry's eyes. Till we meet again, said Professor Trelawney faintly. Your fortune be yours. Oh, and dear, she pointed at Neville. You'll be late next time, so mind you work extra hard to catch up. Harry, Ron, and Hermione descendants. Professor Trelawney's ladder and the winding stair in silence, then set off for the Professor McGonagall's transfiguration lesson. It took them so long to find her classroom that early as they had left aviation, they were only just in time. Harry chose a seat right at the back of the room, feeling as though he were sitting in a very bright spotlight. The rest of the class kept shooting furtive glances at him as though he were about to drop dead at any moment. He hardly heard what Professor McGonagall was telling them about Animagia, wizard who could transform at will into animals, and wasn't even watching when she transformed herself in front of their eyes into a tabby cat with spectacles marking around her eyes. Really, what has got into you all today? Said Professor McGonagall, turning back into herself with a faint pop and staring around at them all. Not that it mattered, but that's the first time my transformation got applause from a class. Everybody's head turned toward Harry again, but nobody spoke. Then Harmony raised her hand. Please, Professor, we have just had our first aviation class and we were reading the tea leaves, and of course, said Professor McGonagall, suddenly frowning. There is no need to say anymore. Miss Granger, tell me, which of you will be dying this year? Everyone stared at her. Me, said Harry finally. I see, said Professor McGonagall, fixing Harry with her beady eyes. Then you should know, Potter, that Sybil Trelawney had predicted the death of one student a year since she arrived at the school. None of them has died yet. Seeing Death Woman is her favorite way of greeting a new class. If it were not for the fact that I have never speak ill of my colleagues, Professor McGonagall broke off, and they saw that her nostrils had gone white. She went on more calmly. Divination is one of the most imprecise branches of the magic. I shall not conceal from you that I have very little practice with it. True seers are very rare, and Professor Trelawney, she stopped again, and then she said in a very matter-of-fact tone, you look in excellent health to me, Potter, so you will be excuse me if I don't let you off from work today. I assure you that if you die, you need to have not hand in it. Hermione laughed. Harry felt a bit better. It was harder to feel scared of a lump of tea leaves away from the dim red light and buffeting perfume of Professor Trelawney's classroom. Not everyone was convinced, however. Ron still looked worried, and Lavender whispered, but what about Neville's cup? The Transfiguration class had finished. They joined the crowd thundering towards the great hall for lunch. Ron, cheer up, said Hermione, pushing a dish of stew toward him. You heard what Professor McGonagall said. Ron scooped stew onto his plate and picked up the fork but didn't start. Harry, he didn't in low, serious voice. You haven't seen a great black dog anywhere, have you? Yeah, I have, said Harry. I saw one the night I left Dursley's. Ron let his fork fall with a clatter. Probably a stray, said Hermione calmly. Ron looked at Hermione as though she had gone mad. Hermione, if Harry's seen a grim, that's bad. He said my uncle Billy saw one and he died 24 hours later. Consigned, said Harmony, yearly pouring herself some pumpkin juice. You don't know what you're talking about, said Ron, starting to get angry. Grim scared the living daylight out of most wizards. There you are, then, said Harmony in a superior tone. They see the grim and die for fright. The grim's not an omen, it's a cause of death. And Harry is still with us because he is not stupid enough to see one and think, right, well, I had better kick the bucket then. Ron mounted wordless at Hermione, who opened her bag, took out her new Artemisy book, and propped it open against the jug juice. I think direction seemed very woolly, she said, searching for her page. A lot of guesswork, if you ask me. There was nothing woolly about the grim in that cup, said Ron hotly. You didn't seem quite so confident when you were telling Harry it was sheep, said Hermione coolly. Professor Trelawney said you didn't have the right aura, you just don't like being had at something for a change. He had touched a nerve. Hermione slammed her. Artemisy looked down on the table so hard that bit of meat and carrot flew everywhere. If being good at deviation means I have to pretend to see death omens in a lump of tea leaves, I'm not sure I'll be studying it much longer. That lesson was absolute rubbish compared with my Artemisy class. She snatched up her bag and stalked away. Ron frowned after her. What's she talking about? She said to Harry. She hadn't been to Artemisy class yet. Harry was pleased to get out of the castle after lunch. Yesterday's rain had cleared the sky, was a clear pale grey, and the green grass was springly and damp underfoot as They set off for their first ever Care of Magic Creatures class. Ron and Hermione weren't speaking to each other. Harry walked beside them in silence as they went down the sloping lawns to Hagrid's hut on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. It was only when he spotted only two familiar bags ahead of them that he realized they must be having this lesson with the Slytherin's Malfoy was talking animatedly to Crabbe and Goyle, who were chortling. Harry was quite sure he knew what they were talking about. Hagrid was waiting for his class at the door of his hut. He stood in his moleskin overcoat with Fang the Boarhound at his heel, looking impatient to start. Come on now, get a move on, he called as the class approached. Got a real threat for you today. Great lesson coming up. Everyone here, right, follow me. For the nasty moment, Harry thought that Hagrid was going to lead them into the forest. Harry had enough unpleasant experience in there to last him a lifetime. However, Hagrid strolled off around the edge of the trees, and 5 minutes later, they found themselves outside a can of paddock. There was nothing in there. Everyone gathered around the fence there. He called, "That's it. Make sure you can see. Now, first thing you'll want to do is open your books." "How?" said the cold, rolling voice of Draco Malfoy. Said Hagrid. "How do we open our books?" Malfoy repeated. "We took out his copy of the Monsters Book of Monsters, which he had bound shut with a length of rope. Other people took theirs out too. Some, like Harry, had belted their books shut. Others had crammed them inside tight bag or clamped them together with a blinder clip. "Hasn't anyone been able to open their books?" said Hagrid, looking crestfallen. The class all shook their hand. "You have got to stroke them," said Hagrid, as though this was the most obvious thing in the world. "Look." He took Hermione's copy and ripped off the spell tab that bound it. The book tried to bite, but Hagrid ran a giant force fire down its spine, and the book shriveled and then fell open and lay quiet on his hand. "Oh, how silly we have been!" Malfoy sneered. "We should have struck them. Why didn't we guess?" "I thought they were funny," Hagrid said uncertainly to Hermione. "Oh, tremendously funny," said Malfoy. "Really witty, giving us a book that tried to rip our hands off." "Shut up, Malfoy," said Harry quietly. Hagrid was looking downcast, and Harry wanted Hagrid's first lesson to be success. "Right then," said Hagrid, who seemed to have lost his thread. So you have got your books, and now you need the magical creatures, yeah? So I'll go and get them. Hang on." He strode away from them into the forest and out of sight. "God, this place is going to the dogs," said Malfoy loudly. "That off-teaching class, my father will have a fit when I'll tell him." "Shut up, Malfoy," Harry repeated. "Careful, Potter, there is a Dementor behind you." "Oh," squealed Lavender Brown, pointing toward the opposite side of the paddock. Trotting toward them were a dozen of the most bizarre creatures Harry had ever seen. They had the bodies behind legs and tails for horses, but the front legs, wings, and heads of what seemed to be giant eagles with a cruel stare colors breaking the large, brilliantly orange eyes. The talons on their front legs were half a foot long and deadly looking, each of them brightest and the thickest leather collar around its neck, which has attached to the long chain, and the end of all of these were held in the vast hand of Hagrid, who had jogging into the paddock behind the creature. "Get up there," he roared, shaking the chain and arranging the creature toward the fence where the class stood. Everyone drew back silently, and Hagrid reached them and tethered the creature to the fence. Hippogriffs, Hagrid rode happily, waving a hand at them. Beautiful, aren't they? Harry couldn't sort of see what Hagrid did. Once you got over the first shock of seeing something that was half ours, half bird, you started to appreciate the hippogriffs. Flaming coats changing smoothly from leather to hair, each of them are different colors, stormy grey, bronze, pinkish, roar, gleaming chestnut, and inky black. So said Hagrid, rubbing his hand together and beaming around. If you want to come a bit nearer, no one seemed to want to. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, however, approached the fence cautiously. The first thing you got to know about hippogriffs is they are proud, said Hagrid. Easily offended hippogriffs are don't never insult one, cause it might be the last thing you have to. Malfoy, Grab, and Goyle weren't listening. They were talking in an undertone, and Harry had a nasty feeling in their way, plotting how best to disrupt the lesson. You always wait for the hippogriffs to make the first move. Hagrid continued. It's polite. See, you walk toward him and he'll bow, and you wait. If he bows back, you're allowed to touch him. If he doesn't bow, then get away from him. Sharpish, cause those talons hurt. Right, who wanted to go first? Most of the class back farther away in answer. Even Harry, Ron, and Hermione have misgives. The hippogriffs were tossing their feathers foreheads and fixing their powerful wings. They didn't seem to like being tethered like this. No one, said Hagrid with a pleading look. I'll do it, said Harry. There was an intake of breath from behind him, and both Lavender and Parvati whispered, Oh no, Harry, remember your tea leaves. Harry ignored them. He climbed over the paddock wire fence. Good night, Harry, roared Hagrid. Right then, let's see how you get on the Buckbeak. He untied one of the chain, pulled the grey hippogriffs away from its fellow, and slipped off its leather collar. The class on the other side of the paddock seemed to be holding its breath. Malfoy's eyes were narrow maliciously. Easy now, Harry, said Hagrid quietly. You have got eye contact. Now try to get blink. Hippogriffs don't trust you if you blink too much. Harry's eyes immediately began to water, but he didn't shut them. Buckbeak had turned his great sharp head and was staring at Harry with one fierce orange eye. That's it, said Hagrid. That's it, Harry. Now bow. Harry didn't feel much like exposing the back of his neck to Buckbeak, but he did as he was told. He gave a short bow and then looked up. The hippogriff was still staring hotly at him. He didn't move. Said Hagrid, sounding worried. Right back away now, Harry. Easy does it. But then, to Harry's enormous surprise, the hippogriff suddenly bent its scary front knees and sank into what was an unmistakable blow. Well done, Harry, said Hagrid aesthetically. Right, you can touch him, pat his beak, go on, feeling that a better reward would have been to back away. Harry moved slowly toward the hippogriff and reached out towards it. He patted its beak several times, and the hippogriff closed his eyes lazily as though enjoyed it. The class broke into applause, all except for Malfoy, Grab, and Goyle, who were looking deeply disappointed. Right then, Harry, said Hagrid, I reckon he might let you ride him. This was more than Harry had bargaining for. He was used to be broomstick, but he wasn't sure a hippogriff would be quite the same. Yeah, climb up there, just behind the wing joint, said Hagrid. Unminded, you don't pull any of his feather out. He won't like that. Harry put his foot on the top of Buckbeak's wing and hoisted himself onto its back. Buckbeak stood up. Harry wasn't sure where to hold on. Everything in front of him was covered with feather. Go on then, roared Hagrid, slapping the hippogriff Hindquarters without wearing 12-foot wings flapped open on either side of Harry. He just had time to sneeze the hippogriffs around the neck before he had soaring upward. It was nothing like a broomstick, and Harry knew which one of the preferred. The hippogriff's wings bit uncomfortable on either side of him, catching him under his leg and making him feel he was about to be thrown off. The glossy feathers slipped under his fingers, and he didn't dare get to stronger grip. Instead of the smooth action of his Nimbus 2000, he now felt himself rocking back towards and forward as the hindquarters of the hippogriffs rose and fell with its wings. Buckbeak flew him once around the paddock and then handed back to the ground. This was the bit Harry had been digging. He leaned back at the smooth neck toward feeling the he was going to slip off over the beak, then felt a heavy thud of the fore-ill assault. Feet hits the ground. He just managed to hold on and push himself straight again. Good work, Harry, roared Hagrid as everyone expected Harry. Malfoy grabbed and Goyle cheered. Okay, who else want to go? Emboldened by Harry's success, the rest of the class climbed cautiously into the bed top. Hagrid untied the hippogriffs one by one, and soon people were bowing nervously all over the paddock. Neville ran repeatedly backward from his, which didn't seem to want to bend its knees. Ron and Hermione practiced on the chestnuts while Harry watched. Malfoy, Grab and Goyle had taken over Buckby. He had bowed to Malfoy, who was now patting his beak, looking disdainful. "This is very easy," Malfoy drawled loud enough for Harry to hear him. "I knew it must have been if Potter could do it. I bet you are not dangerous at all, are you?" he said to Hippogriffs. "Are you, you great ugly brat?" It happened in a flash of steady Talon. Malfoy let out a high-pitched scream, and next moment Hagrid was whistling Buckby back into his collar as he strained to get Malfoy, who lay curled in the grass, blood oozing over his robes. "I'm dying," Malfoy yelled at the class, panicked. "I'm dying. Look at me. It's kill me." "You're not dying," said Hagrid, who had gone very white. "Someone help me, got to get him out here." Hermione ran to hold open the gate. As Hagrid lifted Malfoy easily as they passed, Harry saw that there was a long deep gash on Malfoy's arm. Blood splattered the grass, and Hagrid ran with him up the slope toward the castle. Very shaken, the care of magical creature class followed at a walk. The Slytherins were all shouting about Hagrid. "They should fire him straight away," said Pansy Parkinson, who was in tears. "It was Malfoy's fault," snapped Dean Thomas. Grab and Goyle flexed their muscles threateningly. They all climbed the stone step into the deserted entrance hall. "I'm going to see if he's okay," said Pansy, and they all watched her run up the marble staircase. The Slytherins, still muttering about Hagrid, headed away in a direction of their Dagon common room. Harry, Ron, and Hermione proceeded upstairs to Gryffindor's tower. "Do you think he'll be all right?" said Hermione nervously. "Course he will, Madam Pomfrey can mend words in about a second," said Harry, who had had far worse injuries mended magical by the nurse. That was a really binding thing to happen in Hagrid's first class. "Though wasn't it?" said Ron, looking worried. "Trust Malfoy to mess things up for him." They were among the first to reach the Great Hall at dinner time, hoping to see Hagrid, but he wasn't there. "They wouldn't fire him, would they?" said Hermione anxiously, not touching her stick and kidney pudding. "They had better not," said Ron, who wasn't eating either. Harry was watching the Slytherin's table. A large group, including Grab and Goyle, was huddled towards. Deep in conversation, Harry was sure they were looking up their own version of how Malfoy had been injured. "Well, you can't say it wasn't an First day back, said Ron gloomily. They went up to crowded Gryffindor's common room after dinner and tried to do the homework Professor McGonagall had given them. But all three of them kept breaking off the glancing out of the towering window. There was a light in Hagrid's window, Harry said suddenly. Ron looked at his watch. If we hurried, we could go down and see him. It's still quite early. I don't know, Hermione said slowly, and Harry saw her glance at him. I'm allowed to walk across the grounds, he said pointedly. Cyrus Black hasn't fought past the Dementors yet, has he? So they put their things away and headed out of the portrait hall, glad to meet nobody on their way to the front doors, as they weren't entirely sure they were supposed to be out. The grass was still wet and looked almost black in the twilight when they reached Hagrid's hut. They knocked and a voice rolled, "Come in." Hagrid was sitting in his short leaves at his carved wooden table, his boarhouse fang had his feet in Hagrid's lap. One look told them that Hagrid had been drinking a lot. There was a pivoted tankard almost as big as bucket in front of him, and he seemed to be having difficulty getting them into focus. It's record, he said, think when he recognized them. Don't reckon they have ever had a teacher who lasted on a day before. You haven't been fired, Hagrid, gasped Hermione. Not yet, said Hagrid miserably, taking a huge gulp of whatever was in the tankard. But it's only a matter of time in it's after Malfoy. Poesy, said Ron as they all sat down. It wasn't serious, was it? Madame Pomfrey fixed him. She could, said Hagrid dully, but he's saying it's still at night. Somewhat he's begging me, said Harry and Madame Pomfrey can read anything. He regrew half my bones last year. Trust Malfoy to milk it for all it's worth. School governor have been told to, said Hagrid miserably. Thereupon I started to big, shouted left hippogriff, spread lather, non-flower worm or someone, just though it's make a good first lessons, all my fault. From Malfoy's fault, Hagrid, said Harmony earnestly. Our witness, said Harry, you said hippogriffs attack if you insult them. It's Malfoy's problem that he wasn't listening well. Tell Dumbledore what really happened. You don't worry, Hagrid will batter you up, said Ron. Tear licked out of the cringe corner of Hagrid's bitter black eyes. He grabbed both Harry and Ron and pulled them into a bone-breaking hug. I think you have had enough to drink, Hagrid, said Hermione firmly. He took the cat from the table and went outside to empty it. Maybe she is right, said Hagrid, letting go of Harry and Ron, who both staggered away, rubbing their ribs. Hagrid behaved himself out of his chair and followed Hermione unsteadily outside. They heard a loud splash. What's he done? Said Harry nervously as Hermione came back in with the empty tankard. Struck his head in the water barrel, said Hermione, putting the tankard away. Hagrid came back, his long hair and beard sopping wet, wiping the water out of his eyes. That's better, he said, shaking his hand like a dog and drenching them all. Listen, it was good of you to come and see me. I really Hagrid stopped dead, staring at Harry as though he had only just realized he was there. What do you think you are doing here? He roared so suddenly that they jumped a foot in air. You are not to go wandering around after dark, Harry, and you too listen to me. Hagrid strode over to Harry, grabbed his arm and pulled him to the door. Come on, Hagrid said angrily. I'm taking you all back up to school and don't let me catch you walking down to sea. Me after dark again, I'm not worth that. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for next chapter. Till then, bye bye. See ya.